Welcome, everyone. Today's learning community for family leaders is co-hosted by the FamilyRun Executive Director Leadership Association, or FREDLA, and the National Indian Child Welfare Association, or NICWA. Both organizations are partners in the National TA Network for Children's Behavioral Health, operated by and coordinated through the University of Maryland. The title of our learning community today is Strengthening Ties with Tribal Systems of Care Family Advocates and Family-Run Organizations. My name is Jane Walker, and I'm the Executive Director of FREDLA. And also with me is Melissa Pearson, Project Coordinator for FREDLA. Melissa is going to be telling you more about FREDLA on our call a little bit later. We invite you to ask questions, share resources, and make comments in the chat box. We'd also love to know who's on our call. So if you want to just take a minute and type into the chat box your name and where you're from, so everybody will be able to see who else is on the call. So welcome, everyone, and it is my pleasure to turn it over to our NICWA partners, Corey Matthew and Barbara Gladue, who will share the work they're doing with family advocates in tribal communities and also their culture. Go ahead, Barbara and Corey.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is Corey Matthew, and I am Salish Blackfeet from Montana, and I am the Director of Programs and Policy at the National Indian Child Welfare Association, and I've been in the work for just over a year and a half.
Good morning, everybody. This is Barbara Gladue. I'm Turtle Mountain in Little Shell, Bands of Anishinaabe. I'm the Family Engagement Specialist at the National Indian Child Welfare Association. I would like to start this call off as I start every call, every family engagement monthly call off with a prayer and a story. So thank you, Creator, for bringing us, all of our great minds and hearts and spirits together today. We pray for guidance and protection always in all the work that we do and the families that we serve and the communities we work within. Creator, we pray for your guidance to help us strengthen our communities and our families, our hearts and our spirits in a good way. Miigwech. This story is an Anishinaabe story, and it's titled How the Indians Got Maple Sugar. One day, when a bejo was standing up on a maple tree, suddenly it began to rain maple syrup, not sap, right out of the tree. When a buju got the birch bark tray and held it out to catch the syrup, he said to himself, "This is too easy for the Indians to have syrup just rain down like this." So he threw the syrup away and decided that before they could have the syrup, the Indians would have to give a feast, offer tobacco, speak to the Manitou, and put out some birch bark trays. Nokomis, the grandmother of Winnebeju, showed him how to insert a small piece of wood into each maple tree so that the sap could run down into the vessel beneath. When Manibush tested it, it was thick and sweet. He told his grandmother it would never do to give the Indians the syrup without making them work for it. He climbed to the top of one of the maples, scattered rain all over the trees, dissolving the sugar as it flowered into the birch bark vessels. Now the Indians have to cut wood, make vessels, collect the sap, and boil it for a long time. If they want the maple syrup, they have to do the hard work. And so I told this story because this is the time when the maple syrup runs and the collection and the ceremonies are happening, giving thanks for this traditional first foods. And so I like to start out our calls reminding us, of culture and, why it is, how we can use culture as a way, as resilience, and also, reminding us about our traditional heritage.
And this is Corey Matthew again, and so here at NICWA, we improve the lives of American Indian children and families by helping tribes and other service providers implement services that are culturally competent, community-based, and focused on the strengths and assets of families. And so we actually have other partners on the line who really don't know much about NICWA and what we do. So NICWA works to address the issues of child abuse and neglect through training, research, and public policy, and we are grassroots community development. NICWA offers many different trainings, fee-for-services, which include positive Indian parenting, in-home services, working with child abuse or substance abuse in families, ICWA, understanding ICWA, and we just go out into the community and really help them with where they're at. NICWA also works to support the compliance with the Indian Child Welfare Act of 1978, which seeks to keep American Indian children with American Indian families. So here, with this work includes collaborating with tribal and urban Indian child welfare programs to increase their service capacity, enhancing tribal-state relationships, and providing training, technical assistance, information services. And I just want to say, with this picture, so we serve 15 communities through our systems of care work. And this past year in April, we actually had a great opportunity for all 15 of our communities to come together for peer support and just learning from one another. And we also, at our grantee gathering, we honor our communities who are graduating. So that means they're going through their 4th year, successfully completing the systems of care funding. And this picture here, it's one of our Mescalero tribes offering a gift to Julie Skinner, who we have on the line here through Cherokee Nation, with completing their SOC funding.
Okay, so this next slide really talks about, that every state really has tribal communities, whether they're federally recognized, state recognized, but even if they're unrecognized, as I mentioned in my introduction, I am also Little Shell, which is not a federally recognized tribe. They were once a part of Turtle Mountain Band, but split off and followed Chief Little Shell. I won't go too much into the history, but I just wanted to, have folks aware who weren't that, there are tribal communities in every state. There are 567 tribes that are recognized and eligible for services in the United States. And this statistic we pulled up, only 22% of 5.2 million American Indians live on tribal land. And so that makes about roughly 78% live in urban and rural areas that are non-tribal lands. And so, that's what really sparked our need for collaboration with other organizations, because not all of our tribal members live, even our systems of care, grantees, not all of them are on, they live in rural areas, and so this is a perfect opportunity for NICWA and all of our SOCs to collaborate with FREDLA and share resources. So, and also, you know, when Melissa and Jane and Corey and I were all speaking, you know, getting prepared for this webinar, you know, it was, you know, we let them know that, you know, not all of our tribes have behavioral health. They don't have that resource. And so, or there's, for instance, Greg, I won't put you under the bus, but, you know, Santee Sioux, one of our SOCs, they have telehealth, which we'll talk about later. So they have a hub, for instance, where their behavioral health exists, and they serve so many communities that are rural that's the way that they deliver their behavioral health services. And so, in the next, so it looks different in every community. Some of our communities don't have behavioral health, but what they have is they have family advocates who, or cultural coordinators, and so what they will do is they will, you know, provide events and programs and host workshops and things that, you know, address behavioral health, mental health issues in a traditional way. And so maybe we'll be lucky enough for one of our folks to speak about that further. So, so some tribal communities have the infrastructure to provide behavioral health, and a lot of don't. A lot of communities, tribal communities, just don't have the infrastructure. They don't have the funding. They don't have that resource. And so this is really the area where there is resources needed. And a lot of times, even if there is the infrastructure, that you can't find people to put in those positions, or you get somebody in that position, and there's just an overwhelming need that you can't keep them in that position. They burn out, and so there's really a need there. So once I spoke about this telehealth, and here it is on PowerPoint. So, sorry, go ahead. And this picture here, this is a picture. This was in. Let's go there.
No, this is in Pasquayaki.
In Pasquayaki, sorry. You can see Terry Cross in this picture and Jackie Malmstrom on the horse in the middle there. She's our youth advocate. They went, you know, for a site visit, and were brought to the equine. Were brought to this is their traditional therapy, their equine therapy, and so this is. They do this in combination with their behavioral health providers, and so this is something wonderful that some of our tribes do.
Hey, Barbara, this is Jane. I'm wondering if you could talk, you or Corey, a little bit about Medicaid. The families may be eligible for Medicaid. Is that correct?
Yeah. So, So the issue with Medicaid, and I don't know all the talking points on that, but so the issue with Medicaid is that, you know, on tribes have Indian health services generally, and so most tribal members will use their Indian health services because they don't need to apply for Medicaid, and so I'm not really sure of all the policies around that. I don't. So that's generally. But oh, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say the families that are living in urban areas, not on tribal lands, would they use Medicaid more than Indian Health Service? Because Indian Health Service might not be available to them.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't have the statistic on that, but what I can tell you from my own personal is that So, for instance, I'm from Montana, and I don't. In Montana, that's where the Little Shell are located, and since they aren't federally recognized, there isn't necessarily an Indian Health Services, but there are other Indian Health Services there. So, generally, no matter what tribe you are from, you can use Indian Health Services anywhere. And so so I moved to Portland, I can use the Indian Health Services here in Oregon. I go to Grand Ron and get dental work done there. I just have to show my tribal ID. And so that's generally what most tribal members do that I'm aware of. And so there's not, they would most likely use that. That's just what I know from my own experience. Yeah.
It'd be great to have people on the phone from tribal communities kind of chime in on that about whether or not in your communities people access Medicaid, whether they prefer Indian health services, whether those are even available. That would be really helpful if people could chime in on that. Okay? Thanks, Barbara.
Yes.
Didn't mean to interrupt.
No. I know that NICWA does a lot of work. Our community development specialists, they would have way more knowledge about this than myself. That's really the work that they do, not really the work that I'm diving into right now. And so they work with a consultant that helps our SOCs work with billables for Medicaid and, talk about issues of Medicaid and enrollment and such. So I won't wait. I'll move on, and if somebody wants to comment on that, then we can maybe come back to that. So family advocates, that's not necessarily their name, and their roles are so wide in scope. Like I've mentioned, that some are called cultural coordinators, some are called navigators, some are called family advocates, or Montana's, they're just wraparound facilitators, and they don't necessarily work directly with caregivers, moms, dads, aunties, uncles. I mean, they do, but their main person that they work with are youth in schools. They work particularly in school, and so there's so many different roles in our 15 different sites that we serve. So it looks like Julie Skinner has commented here. I'll go ahead and read that. It says we have a hospital and 8 clinics in our service areas. Families use IHS. However, if they work for the tribe, they have access to health insurance. We also have a program that advocates and educates families on Medicaid. At our Children's Behavioral Health Clinic, we have a coordinator that educates and can enroll families with Medicaid and ACA. And what I, add to that, too, is that here in Portland, Oregon, for instance, NARA Clinic, which is an IHS clinic, NARA stands for Native American Rehabilitation Association, and they have lots of services, but one of them is an IHS clinic, and they too do, as Julie Skinner said, they will help enroll in Medicaid as a supplement, for dental and that, but NARA also has recently opened a dental clinic, so that's wonderful. And then currently there are we have 15 SOC tribal grantees that we work with, and so for Montana, for instance, Montana OPI, while they, they serve 7 different tribes, And so they have their WAF, is what they call them, their wraparound facilitators in those different locations all over the state of Montana. And Sante Sioux is the same. They have a ton of different locations. So thank you for that information, Julie. Family advocates, I covered this, maybe given different roles and names and work with different aspects of the family. And so some I said this, some of them might be called WAFs. The wraparound facilitators, they work with K through 12 age kids, and their role really is to help the child process and become more aware of what their resources are. That's not necessarily, they don't make decisions for them. They give them the tools. They don't give them the tools. They help them create tools so that they can process and make decisions on their own. And they support them in any way that the youth sees fit. Now, with appropriate development, right? I get that we're not going to ask a kindergartner or a first grader, what do you think's best for you? Necessarily. I mean, we would ask them that, but not in those words, and we would, it would be age appropriate. And so,
Barbara, this is Jane again. Could you talk a little bit about special education? Is the federal IDEA law applicable in schools on tribal lands and such?
Yeah, for sure. I think, on tribal lands, it's run by the federal government, the BIA, and so any rules that, or policies that apply to the federal government, you can automatically assume that they apply to Indian lands. And so that is a federal policy and law, and so IEPs, and so absolutely.
So would some of your advocates be at school with the family, attending IEP meetings or such?
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. Yeah, for sure. Our advocates, absolutely, the ones that work at school, they for sure advocate. They help parents become aware of all the, different policies and go over the book, the huge IEP, with families and help them to understand, like, the different components, what their, what their rights are as a parent, what their resources are, how they can, help. And then they also sit in the meeting and help kind of navigate that whole system with families. Yeah.
Fantastic. Great.
Thank you. And so, so my question could also be to you, Jane, in your work. Do you folks also, is that appropriate in your roles too? Do you guys do that in your work?
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's so much crossover.
Are you going to talk about that in your part of the presentation? Okay, cool.
Yes,
okay,
will.
I won't ask you now to spoil it.
No.
Okay.
No, but you're, yeah.
Thank you for that. I thank you for bringing that up, because it's such a huge component when our families become more aware and included in on things and understand what their roles and resources are and what they can ask for, and because particularly in my own experience in the work that I've done, even as a tribal member and a parent, I never felt included been on those meetings. I never felt like those meetings were for me and my child. I always felt like they were about me and my child. And so it wasn't until I became an educator myself that I really dove in deep into IEP and really understood what the resources were and how to go through all that paperwork and to kind of sift out the meat and potatoes for my child that, you know, I was able to really understand it. And so, yeah, absolutely, that for sure is an important role in Indian country for our family advocates. If any one of our SOCs wants to answer that question in the chat box too, that would be awesome. Maybe what your role is, if you work with your families in IEP meetings.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yep. We'll advance in our slides. So on this slide it talks about some of our family advocates have family councils, and this is really an SOC kind of bigger picture goal where family councils really inform tribal council and the like about what family-driven care needs to look like for them. And so, and working with, parents, elders, caregivers, aunties, uncles. And so I know that one of our community, this is really a new, I shouldn't say that it's new, because it's a very traditional way of doing things, actually, is to have councils and to have everybody in the community be a part of that council and everybody's voice is heard, even down to the young people. And so this is a very traditional way of doing things. However, because of extermination, relocation, termination, all these federal policies that really oppressed, tribal folks, a lot of these traditional ways of doing things were lost or on some scale have been taken away. And so the systems of care really, that's kind of, we're coming back to that. We're coming back to having family councils, having elders, youth, families, caregivers, aunties, uncles, and the like sit on these and inform council as to what it is that they need in their communities to be sustainable. And if anybody, any SOC, tribal SOC want to speak to that, please do so. I know that a few of our SOCs actually have family councils and are anywhere on the scale in the beginning stages of really, educating the council as to, or not educating, just getting on the same page, building their own policies, building their own infrastructure, how they're going to, what their work is going to look like in their community, and how they can best serve their families. And so if anybody wants to speak to that, please do so.
So before we get to Fredla's part of the Barbara and Corey, could I go back? We had a wonderful discussion about terminology. And for those on the call who are not of Native American or Indian descent, I think this would be really helpful. Both Barbara and Corey shared their backgrounds, and I was trying to ask what is the preferred terminology. And Barbara and Corey, could I ask you to relate some of what you talked about on your own backgrounds and in reference to terminology in your own tribes and families?
Well, so for me, I grew up, my grandparents pretty much, we lived with our grandparents most of our lives, and both of my grandparents, my paternal grandparents, were raised in boarding schools from the time that they were very little, and so they weren't raised with their. Both of my grandparents had about 13 brothers and sisters, but they weren't raised with them, and so they weren't, they didn't grow up speaking their language, although before they were taken from their homes, that's only Anishinaabe Moen was spoken in the home, and so, going to boarding school, they lost that. They lost the language, and so, and my grandpa really had a hard time being called an Indian, and so he never liked us saying that. He never liked us saying that word, and for whatever reason, so Native American or American Indian was the term that we used in our home speaking, and it wasn't really until I really got and really educated myself on American Indian and the movement, because it wasn't really, my grandparents were so busy socializing their kids so that they didn't speak the language, because that's what they had to do to survive in their time. They couldn't get jobs if they were Indian, or they spoke their language, or they had long hair, or they even, had any kind of look of an Indian. And so they really socialized their children, and so, yeah.
Corey? And actually, mine was quite different. I was born and raised on the Flathead Indian Reservation in Montana, and I'm Salish and Blackfeet, so went to school in the Flathead, and then in the summer I was sent to Browning, and got to know, I was really embedded with both of my cultures, and we were different. We just called ourselves, Indian. And it wasn't really until, I left the reservation, people would say, oh, what ethnicity are you? And I would say Indian, and they'd say, oh, you mean Native American. And so for me, it was just the opposite of Barb. I always just called myself, I was an Indian. And so, every tribe is different. Every community, there's Alaskan Native, there's Native American, so, and indigenous. So, it just also depends on, your own tribe and how you prefer to call, or what you call yourself.
Mm-hmm. So probably the best thing would be to ask, what terminology do you prefer? Of course, first of all, or asking what tribe, the name of the tribe, and, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. All right. And anyone on the call who'd like to chime in on that conversation, we would welcome your thoughts on what is preferred terminology in your tribe, in your family, in your community. I think those two contrasting stories are very enlightening for those of us who are not as familiar with the tribal communities. So thank you both for sharing those stories. So Melissa, over to you from Fredla.
All right. Thank you, Jane. Excuse me. My name is Melissa Pearson, and as Jane mentioned, I'm a project coordinator with FREDLA, the FamilyRun Executive Director Leadership Association. And I wanted to, I think, the conversation that just happened between Corey and Barb related to terminology and preferred terminology really does create a nice segue into the this section that we'll be talking about. Because I think it speaks to the similarities across both the tribal communities the families involved in tribal communities and family-run organizations and families that they serve. And so much of what we do is really about meeting families where they are, letting families lead us, and allowing families to teach us what we need to know to ensure that we are culturally responsive and culturally respectful. So I think, as Jane summed it up, it's really about kind of, asking, and asking in a way that really genuinely conveys respect and curiosity about teach me what I need to know so that I can be most helpful to you. So thank you, Corey and Barb, for all that you shared in your piece. This image here titled Family Movement really does kind of speak to the values around what FREDLA and family-run organizations and tribal communities, I think, strive for. And it's really that, family is everything. And so as you notice, there's some pictures here, one that says families are everything, some balloons that were captured as part of an activity that FREDLA sponsored that I'll talk to you a little bit more about later, but it says family-run organizations, and then some images around families and youth and community partners. And really that's what makes up the family movement that started over 25 years ago, is how do we partner with youth, young adults, families, and communities and providers to really bring about better outcomes and services and supports that are responsive for children, youth, and families. So we wanted to kind of talk with you a little bit about, from FREDLA's perspective and from the perspective of family-run organizations, for those of you on the phone who don't know FREDLA and the work that we do and the work of family-run organizations related to system of care. As I mentioned earlier, our name is FamilyRun Executive Director Leadership Association, otherwise referred to as FREDLA. We're a national network of family-run organizations that started back in 2014, so we're relatively new. And when we were founded by 16 executive directors of family-run organizations across the country who came together and recognized the need for an organization that really focused on building leadership and organizational capacity of family-run organizations. And so that's really our mission, is to accomplish that leadership and organizational capacity development. And as Jane mentioned earlier, we are a core partner with the National Technical Assistance Network for Children's Behavioral Health. So what do we do as a national network? We provide technical assistance and support, just as NICWA does, in several key areas. And some of those are listed here on the slide. We assist family-run organizations who are in kind of a startup phase, who are looking to form, are trying to explore what might that look like, what do they need to put in place, what are all the rules and regulations related to existing as a nonprofit, and all the way through to the sustainability component of family-run organizations, and really helping support them to explore what does it mean to be sustainable as a family-run organization, and what are all of the components that need to exist. Around that startup and sustainability and everything in between, FREDLA produced some standards of excellence for family-run organizations, and we really, part of that was around this component of really strengthening the organizational capacity to make family-run organizations strong, viable, and sustainable. As I mentioned earlier, we work around strengthening leadership and governance of organizations. And what I mean by that is we really look at leadership on a continuum, from developing and growing up family members as leaders, as well as growing leadership capacity of the leadership within the family-run organization. We look at governance both within family-run organizations but also within systems of care, and how important governance within systems of care needs to ensure that it includes family members and multiple family members to ensure that that voice is always present and those values are always present in the operation of systems of care. We do a lot of work supporting communities, states, and regions around parent peer support services, which would be very similar to the family advocate role that Barb talked about. And we support community, states, and regions around training of parent peer support providers, what kind of training makes sense, what kinds of competencies parent peer support providers need to have, what different training packages might look like, what are some core things to look for when recruiting potential parent peer support providers. So how might you assess the readiness of folks to be parent peer support providers, as well as what type of a certification process a state or region might want to have in place to initially certify that a parent's peer support provider is ready to provide that peer support, but then also what kind of ongoing support and professional development might need to be in place to ensure that that parent peer support provider continues to grow their skill and continues to be prepared to meet the challenges walking alongside families in that role. We focus a lot on building family voice and involvement, so we support a lot of communities around how do you effectively engage, involve, and include families at all levels, at the child and family level, at the service delivery level, and at the systems policy level. Strategic planning, we do that both at a community level as well as an organizational level. And lastly, evaluation, and both evaluation as it relates to systems of care and how important it is to engage and include family members within that evaluation, but also the power and importance and necessity of family-run organizations gathering, collecting, and disseminating data about the efficacy of the work that they do with families. So you'll see on this slide titled Family Acceptance Project Training, this is an example of one of the ways that we really support communities, states, and regions around kind of ensuring that family-run organizations, family leaders, and community-based providers have a strong skill set to meet the needs of families and youth. And we had the great pleasure of partnering with the TA network to be able to offer a 2-day training for family leaders, family-run organizations, and providers from across the country to come together and learn from Dr. Caitlin Ryan about from the Family Acceptance Project. And this was a training where we got an opportunity to really dig deep into how we might support families around their acceptance behaviors and approaches with youth who identify as LGBTQ. So this is just kind of an image that helps depict one of the ways that we as FREDLA help support the needs of communities, regions, and states. So when we talk about family-run organizations, what do we mean by that, and how do we define that? So the first and foremost thing, and Barbara said something very similar to this, that family-run organizations are really by families and for families. And what we mean by that is that, first and foremost, they're independent nonprofit organizations. So they're operated by families, and they're operated for families. And when we look at that by and for, it really distills down to a board of directors that is made up of at least 50% family members. And family members, when we define family members, we define that very broadly. So it could be biological, adoptive, foster family, but it's family members in the sense that they are or have served as a primary caregiver of a child, youth, or young adult with emotional, behavioral, or mental health needs. Family-run organizations are operated and led by executive directors who are family members with that lived experience having or currently raising a child with mental and behavioral health needs. And those organizations are primarily focused on providing advocacy, education, support, information referral, and programming for families, caregivers, youth, and family members. So that's really, when we think about family-run organizations, that's what we mean by that term. So again, this image, this is a group of family members and staff persons from one of our family-run organizations that was involved in a children's mental health awareness campaign that we did in 2016 titled FamilyRun Organizations SOAR. And this was really, we utilized balloons as kind of our prop to demonstrate the importance and the value around the work that family-run organizations do related to supporting the unique needs of children's mental health. And there's a link on this slide, so you'll have an opportunity to download these slides. And if you click on that link, it'll take you to a video that we produced that shows family-run organizations throughout the country who submitted photos, as well as some data that we provide about the work that family-run organizations do. So here is some data from some very recent current data. We recently conducted a survey of family-run organizations throughout the United States and asked them a wide variety of things to get a better sense of what family-run organizations look like, what kinds of work do they do with families, what are the makeup of their staff, etc. And here's just a couple of key points that we were able to pull out of that we thought would be important to share with you folks today. The first is that we found out there's over 110 local, regional, and statewide family-run organizations across the United States. The second piece was that the number one reason families reach out and connect and request support from a family-run organization is related to school. And so this really speaks to, the question that Barbara was asking as she, when she shared with us the work that family advocates within the tribal system of care communities do in supporting and educating family members related to school and IEPs and special education and such. And this is very much a large component and emphasis of the work that family-run organizations do because, as it says here, it is the number one reason families contact family-run organizations. It might be because their child's been suspended. It might be because their child's struggling behaviorally at school. It might be because the parent's being contacted by the school multiple times a week because they're not quite sure how to effectively support the child to be successful at school. And so our family-run organizations do a lot of work with families to understand the laws around special education and 504 plans. They do a lot of work around helping families understand what supports and services can be accessed for their child in a school setting, and also do a lot of work trying to help create an environment where families and school personnel can work together to create a plan that really does meet the unique individualized needs of that child and family, and so that families and school staff can work as a team to make sure that that student is successful. And lastly, we really wanted to share kind of a staggering piece of data with you around the number of families that family-run organizations are serving across the country. And from our most recent survey, we learned that family-run organizations served 114,000 families and employed over 670 family members in 2016 within those family-run organizations. So this really does speak to the amount of work that family-run organizations are doing to not only support families, but to really elevate the voice and inclusion of families within systems of care, and to employ families as leaders to help grow up the next generation of family leaders and to ensure that family voice, perspective, and expertise is being infused across all of those levels I mentioned earlier. So this image is from this year, 2017's Children's Mental Health Awareness Campaign. And these are photos of the Fredla staff. Jane is on your left, and I am right next to her. We then have Millie Sweeney, Peggy Nickel, and Saria Ratliff. And these are our Fredla staff members. This year, we really asked family, youth, family-run organization staff to indicate how their family-run organization had supported them. And we titled this year's campaign, Family-Run Organizations Supporting Families, Improving Lives, One Family at a Time. And so we developed a template and asked people to take pictures with the template to tell us how their family-run organization supported them. And you'll notice that some of them talk about, excuse me, they supported them to be a voice for families, to advocate for change, and to be a leader in the family movement. So those were, and again, there's a link on this slide that will take you to a video that shows you families and family-run organization staff from across the country who submitted photos for this year's campaign. So lastly, I want to share with you a little bit about our parent peer support providers, which are very similar, again, to the family advocates that Barb talked about. These are parents or family members who have lived experience having raised or currently raising a child, youth, or young adult with emotional, behavioral, or mental health challenges. They, too, as with the tribal system of care communities, are often called different things in different communities. So you might hear them referred to as family navigators, family support partners, family support specialists, and even family advocates. But their function is primarily the same, and it's really to walk alongside families and teach them how to access services that they need for their child and family, how to navigate the complex, often confusing child-serving systems that they find their child and family involved in, how to become a strong self-advocate for their child and family's needs, and to develop skills around how to partner with providers in order to get their needs met. This last quote here, I think, really does wrap up this joint presentation nicely. And it's really about how we accomplish the great deal that we need to together. And it's a Helen Keller quote, "Alone we can do so little, together we can do so much." And I think that that quote really does speak to the essence of what both the tribal system of care communities, family-run organizations are doing. And so I'm going to pass it back over to Jane Walker to talk a little, and Corey Matthew to talk about opportunities.
Sure. Thank you, Melissa. Thank you, Barbara and Corey. We are going to open the phones, and Gary, it's going to take a minute to do that. Is that correct? Gary is the go-to guy at the University of Maryland that runs all the technology, and we want to publicly thank him for his stellar job he does every time for us. Thank you, Gary. So,
yeah.
Is everybody now open online?
No. So first thing I want everyone to do who dialed in, and we have about, looks like about 10 folks who are dialed into audio. If you have a mute function on your phone, a button or something that you can press on your dial pad if you called in using a cell phone, please go ahead and mute your line for us. If you don't have that, then what you're going to do is press *1. *1 will mute your line, and then when you want to ask a question or add to the conversation, you would press *1 again. I'll put these instructions in the chat box. I'm going to go ahead and unmute the lines now, but I want to make sure that everyone mutes their lines that can up front so that we don't have any weird feedback, and we can continue on with the webinar.
Okay. So let's wait for a second for Gary to get these instructions down so that we want everybody to have an opportunity to chime in. While we're waiting for that, Corey and Barbara and Melissa, when the four of us talked, we kind of brainstormed some ways for family-run organizations and tribal communities to work together. We certainly heard in these two presentations many parallel efforts, many parallel issues, and many parallel roles, and certainly an underlying foundation for both organizations and movements around family and children. So with that, Corey, Barbara, Melissa, the opportunities that we thought about of working together are, of course, making that step to reach out, which I know is difficult for both family-run organizations and tribal communities. Any thoughts about that? How people could do that? What's a good start? Anybody on the phone? I don't know if the lines are open yet. Okay. So if you did not dial in, then you need to put your comments in the chat box. If you did dial in, you should be able to just make a comment. So.
Well, Jean, this is Melissa, and I think one of the pieces that kind of stood out to me when Barb was talking was really that statistic around how many tribal members and tribal families are living off tribal lands, out in the communities, you know, alongside the family-run organization staff. And so, you know, just based on that data alone, trying to think about how there could be opportunities to partner with American Indian and Native American community groups within states and communities, sharing of potential education training opportunities for family members in the communities. Those kinds of opportunities, I think, could be good places to start a dialogue between family-run organizations and tribal families and tribal communities to begin to learn more about one another and what each other has to offer for families and youth.
Okay. Any thoughts? Anybody else? The lines are unmuted at this moment, so we invite your comments. Don't be shy. Barbara, Corey, do you have any thoughts on that?
So yeah, I was kind of given a little bit of space there, but so we talked about family councils and such, and you talked about family councils, and so maybe in the future, on a future call or webinar, maybe we can collaborate once again, and we can do some pre-work and get some resources and ideas of what your 101, you know, family-run organizations are doing in terms of like helping family councils get together, and what kind of work they're doing, and I can get together with my SOC tribes and see who's doing what in terms of family council. And maybe, and what's working, what isn't working, how, and maybe we can start a dialogue about, okay, well, what are step 1, 2, and 3? Like, how do we help you get family councils, get families' voices to the table? What does that look like?
Great.
Just an idea, just a thought.
I think that's a great idea. Others on the call? Anybody?
I think that, this is Saria, I think that would be very helpful to have ahead of time.
Okay. All right, another thought that we had was sharing resources. Family-run organizations generally produce a lot of information. Newsletters, guidebooks for families on IEPs or things like that. And so just sharing those resources could be very helpful, and likewise, tribal communities sharing resources they have with family-run organizations would be very helpful. We all know the need is so great, the resources are so scarce. We really need to be working together because we may be different tribes, and all of us originated from tribes, but we're all one family. So we need to be working together for our benefit of our families and children. And so sharing resources could be a good start. Many family-run organizations have conferences and extending, not just extending an invitation, but making a concerted effort to invite, welcome, and it would be helpful to know what would make a conference welcoming for tribal communities to attend, or vice versa for family-run organizations to attend any events that may be hosted by tribal communities as well. Any thoughts about that?
This is Saria again. In California, with the diversity that we have, I participated in a community roundtable through a family-run organization that was very helpful because during the community roundtable, there was information that was shared to just be a part of the community roundtable, to be a partner. And there was community members from every aspect of the community, and being a member of the council, the roundtable, what we did was identify the need and to actually talk about, what is it that would help the community and how the community, trainings and that type of thing. So we developed resources. We did attend a training and things like that. So, and we had like keynote speakers and things of that sort. So it was very helpful. And we went through the mental health department, the county, because in California, we found that it was very helpful to get support from the county. So that was a success for us.
Okay. Good idea. I see a couple people are typing. Any other thoughts? We have professional development, training. We mentioned conferences. Any other ways that people feel like we could reach out and work together? Those of you who are open on the phones, chime in. I feel like people are holding back here. And we really want your ideas and thoughts. Okay.
Jane, this is Pat Hunt. I feel like we all work really, really hard and we don't spend enough time celebrating the things that we accomplish or taking opportunities to celebrate things together. So planning those celebrations together, and as far as like conferences and trainings and things like that, not just the inviting, but actually to join one another in the planning of those events, I think could strengthen the relationship and work as well.
Those are great suggestions. So don't just, after you've planned the whole meeting, extend the invitation. Great idea. Involve either the family-run organization or the tribal community, whoever is hosting, involve them in the planning. Wonderful idea. And also the celebration. Fantastic. Who doesn't love a celebration? And God knows we need to celebrate. So Steve Gracie has mentioned steps 1, 2, and 3 of getting started with opening communication. But can you talk about where to start? How might one initiate this? And with whom in any given tribe? That's a very good question. Who would you contact? Corey, Barbara, would you have any thoughts on that?
Are we answering Stephen Grass's question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's a good question. If you're not, if you have a tribal community in your state or region, and you would be interested in reaching out, but who do you reach out to?
We work with. Well, we can give a list of tribes that we work with and communities that they work with.
Okay.
Like I said, because there's several, and so that's a starting point.
Yeah, with your guys' 110 organizations you guys work with, it would be great to see which state those are in, so some of our tribes can also look to see how they can collaborate with the ones that are identified as family-run organizations.
Okay, that's a very good idea. As a matter of fact, Fredla just completed an update of the list, and it's actually 118 organizations. So we believe that as of last week, we have a current list. Now, that list may change as of next week, but it was accurate as of last week. We find that organizations' information changes, as well as some organizations are emerging, and while other ones may be fading away.
It's a nice
so
segue,
great.
Jane, to a comment that just came in from Greg Donovan. Greg Donovan's comment is assistance by existing family-run organizations to aid in mobilizing interested family members to more formally form organizations or at least coalitions in their communities. We have currently created advisory committees, but there is a danger these may lack permanence.
That's a great observation, yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. Greg, are you referring to councils and coalitions within the tribal communities that you would like to learn from family-run organizations, how to create some permanency to those? I think that's what you're, yeah. Okay. Yeah. So maybe, again, those lists of maybe we could help connect you with some family-run organizations who are near where you're located. That could be a resource.
And just to speak on Greg's behalf, I hope you don't mind, Greg. Greg is the Executive Director of the Sante Sioux Nation Systems of Care. And, well, actually, they call it Society of Care because systems is an oppressive word used in their tribal SOC families really, they renamed it Societies of Care. And so
good for them.
Their SOC serves, I think 6, Greg, maybe you can, different urban and rural tribal communities around Nebraska. Yeah.
Oh. Julie Skinner also commented that they work in some very rural areas where family-run organizations did not exist. Therefore, using community organizing and mobilizing, they started one of their own.
The power of parents. Good for you, Julie. That's great.
Yeah, and actually, with Julie's comment, that is very, very spot on to where, some of our communities are very rural, so they have to, utilize within the tribal community to start up their own.
And,
Julie Skinner is from the Cherokee Nation.
Okay. So Julie, in a very rural situation like that, and I'm not sure what state Julie is from, but could tap into the family-run organization, if there is one in that state, and ask for resources or things, because it might be very difficult to develop those on her own, but the family organization might be very glad to share those on information on IEPs or information on different, mental health disorders like ADHD or whatever, to help parents understand what's happening. So that would be a perfect example how a very rural tribal community might get support from a family-run organization. So thanks, Greg and Julie, for sharing that. Any other thoughts from people on the call? Great conversation so far.
Jane, I would move beyond advisory capacity sometimes too, and make sure that including people in governance bodies or boards of directors of the family-run organizations, and
absolutely, great idea.
Real decision making is happening about direction and.
Good point. Thanks, Pat. Yeah. Any other thoughts here? Well, I think we need to be there for each other, support each other, share resources. So this is the first of events co-hosted by Fredla and Nicola. I certainly hope it's not the last. It won't be the last. And I want to thank everyone who participated on the call. We had a great turnout. And special thanks to Corey and Barbara. I'm telling you, I know busy people, but I have never met two busier people in the world than Corey and Barbara. They are constantly on the run, and I believe even today, as they were doing this webinar, they were at a NICWA training somewhere. So special thanks to them for all the time it took to plan this and for reaching out to their tribal system of care communities and getting them to join the call, and to all of the Fredla family-run organizations as well. We hope this is the beginning of great things working together, the first of many opportunities. So,
Jane, can we just remind folks about the Files tab below, too?
Yes. So here's the contact information for NICWA, the contact information for Fredla, and then if you note down on the page, there's something called Files. Under the chat box, there are some great resources in there on the family organization, tips for outreach to families, and a great newsletter that NICWA did on strengthening, what was the name of it? It was a newsletter that NICWA did on, I think you actually see them up listed here under resources.
What tribal communities can do. Yep.
To sustain family-driven care. So those resources are available for you as files to be downloaded. As Melissa said, this webinar will be available for people to listen to and download in, Gary, about a week, is it? We'll send out the link to everybody registered on the call.
Correct.
Okay. So you'll be able to share this with other members of your organization or tribe, and we hope you do. And again, you'll be able to access the resources right here, right now. But also, if you aren't at your computer right now, can't do it, when you get the link to this webinar, you'll be able to access the resources then, as well as the videos that Melissa mentioned that Fredla did last year and this year for Children's Mental Health Awareness. So with that, again, thank you to everybody, Barbara, Corey, all the people who joined us today, Gary, our stellar tech guy, Melissa, and myself. Have a great rest of the day. And
Corey and I wanted to thank you too, Melissa and Jane, for making this possible and providing your information as well to our communities. We appreciate all the efforts that you put out, and we appreciate all the work. You know, our NICWA has been involved with your agency since I came on. I learned about you because you guys are like, you know, #1 in family-run organizations, putting out, disseminating information and tools for families. So we appreciate the work that you do and collaborating with us at NICWA. So thank you.
well, back at you. All right, everybody. Thank you. Thank you. And
Good
have a
day.
great day.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.